My millionaire grandpa found me and my daughter living under a bridge. I froze. My father had always told me he was dead. Grandpa took us to his mansion and then revealed a secret about my father that changed everything. Can you imagine losing absolutely everything? Your wife, your home, your family, all in the blink of an eye. Then, just when you think you've hit rock bottom, sleeping under a bridge with your baby, a ghost from your past appears, shattering every lie you ever believed and changing your entire world forever. My wife left when our daughter, Cameron, was just 8 months old. I remember the pain, the shock, the sheer, gut-wrenching betrayal. With nowhere else to go, I packed up what little we had and took my baby girl back to my parents' house, clinging to the hope that family would at least offer us shelter, a safe harbor. But a few brutal months later, they ruthlessly kicked us out, onto the unforgiving streets, just like trash. Penniless, homeless, abandoned by everyone I thought loved me, Cameron and I wandered, eventually finding a cold, damp shelter under a highway bridge, becoming vagrants in our own hometown. I honestly thought my life had reached its absolute, crushing rock bottom. Until that night. The wind howled like a banshee, cutting right through me, and there, amidst the biting cold and the darkness, an old man appeared. He was tall, dressed in a sharp, expensive suit, holding an umbrella against the drizzle that had started. He looked at me, his eyes piercing through the gloom, and simply said, "I am your grandfather." I froze, utterly stunned, because my whole life, my father had told me my grandfather was long dead. What happened next, what he revealed, changed everything I thought I knew, everything I was, and everything I ever would be. You know, I'm Ronald Hole, 31 years old. Just a factory worker, living in a small, forgotten industrial town in Indiana. My life was never easy, not really, but I never, not in my wildest nightmares, imagined it could collapse so quickly, so brutally. Just a few months ago, it feels like a lifetime now, I had a home. Modest, yes, hard-earned, absolutely, but it was ours. I had Melissa, the woman I loved more than anything, and our little daughter, Cameron, who was my entire universe, my reason for breathing. But now, all of that is just a memory, fading like smoke in the wind, a painful echo in my shattered heart. Every single morning, I used to wake up at 5 a.m., before the dawn could even begin to break through the gray, grimy rooftops of our town. I dragged myself out of bed, every muscle in my shoulders aching from the previous day's brutal work at the steel factory. The deafening roar of machinery, the acrid, metallic smell of burning metal, the constant sweat rolling down my forehead, that was my life, day in and day out. But I never complained. Not once. I worked for Melissa, for Cameron. For my daughter's pure, innocent smile when I held her in my arms. For the gentle, loving look in Melissa's eyes, back when she still loved me. Our home was just a small apartment, really. Stained walls, worn-out furniture. My factory wages were just enough to cover the rent, buy milk for Cameron, and keep the fire burning in our humble home. Melissa used to work as an office clerk, but after Cameron was born, she quit to stay home and care for her. And I didn't mind. Not at all. Even though the financial burden weighed so heavily on my shoulders, like a concrete slab, I truly thought that's what a man does. You provide for your family, no matter how tough it gets, right? "Are you okay, Ron?" Melissa would ask me one evening, as I slumped into a chair, my hands still grimy, smelling of machine oil. She'd stand in the corner of our tiny kitchen, the dim yellow light from the single bulb casting a faint glow on her brown hair. I'd force a smile, nod. "I'm fine. As long as you and Cameron are happy, I can handle anything." But I didn't notice. Or maybe, I just chose not to notice, because the truth was too painful. The look in Melissa's eyes had changed. She no longer looked at me the way she used to. Her smiles became forced, strained. Our conversations grew shorter, awkward. Some nights, when I came home late from a shift, I'd find her sitting alone in the living room, eyes glued to her phone, her fingers scrolling quickly, almost frantically, as if trying to hide something. "Who's that?" I'd ask, trying to keep my tone light, casual. "Just an old friend," she'd reply too quickly, snapping off the screen. I told myself I was imagining things. Melissa was my wife, the mother of my child. She wouldn't do anything to hurt our family. But deep down, I felt it. A growing distance between us, like a small, barely perceptible crack in a wall, spreading wider, deeper each day. And I didn't have a clue how to fix it. Cameron, though, she was my only light. At 8 months old, With her chubby cheeks and big, round, innocent eyes, she always looked at me as if I were her entire universe. Every time I held her, my exhaustion, my worries, they just melted away. "You're my treasure. You know that?" I'd whisper, as she grabbed my finger with her tiny hand and giggled, that pure, infectious sound. Those moments, they made me forget the piling bills, the late-night overtime shifts, and the increasingly frequent times Melissa avoided my gaze. But then, the doubt started. It began to gnaw at me, slowly, relentlessly. One evening, I came home earlier than usual. I walked into the apartment, and caught Melissa hurriedly shoving her phone into her pocket. She flinched when she saw me, visibly. And for a brief, gut-wrenching moment, I saw it, pure panic in her eyes. "Why are you so nervous?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm, steady, despite the tremor in my own chest. "It's nothing," she said. But her voice trembled, betraying her, as if she were hiding a deep, dark secret. I didn't want to believe my instincts, but they grew stronger, more insistent, like a storm brewing on the horizon, gathering dark clouds. And that storm? It hit faster than I could have ever imagined, sweeping away everything I once called family. It was a Saturday. I had taken a rare day off to stay home with Cameron. Melissa said she needed to go out, to meet a friend. "Just grabbing coffee, don't worry," she said, but her eyes, they just wouldn't meet mine. I nodded, holding Cameron in my arms, watching Melissa leave, her purse swinging on her shoulder. Something about the way she walked, the way she held herself, made my heart tighten, but I didn't dare dwell on it. That night, Melissa came home late. I was sitting on the sofa, Cameron fast asleep in her crib. When Melissa walked in, I caught a whiff of it, an unfamiliar perfume, not the one she usually wore. It was sweet, cloying, mocking. "Where were you all day?" I asked, trying to keep my tone gentle, but the anger was rising. She just shook her head, muttering something about meeting an old colleague. I wanted to believe her, God, how I wanted to believe her, but my heart was screaming otherwise. The next day, I did something I never, ever thought I'd do. While Melissa was in the shower, I checked her phone. Just a few minutes scrolling through her messages shattered my world into a million pieces. The words on the screen cut into my heart like sharp, rusty knives. "I miss you," read a message from an unsaved number. "Meet again tonight. I'll tell Ron I'm seeing a friend." And then, dozens more messages. Sweet. Intimate. From a man I didn't know, a stranger. But I knew enough to understand that Melissa had betrayed me, utterly and completely. I stood there, hands trembling, the phone slipping from my grasp, hitting the floor with a dull thud. When Melissa stepped out of the bathroom, she looked at me, then at the phone on the ground. Her face went pale, drained of all color. "Ron," she stammered, but I didn't let her finish. "Who is he, Melissa?" My voice wasn't from anger, not truly. It was from pure, unadulterated pain. "Who is he that you could do this to me?" "To Cameron?" She looked up, her eyes shimmering with an emotion I couldn't decipher. Was it regret? Or cold, hard resolve? "Ron," she said, her voice chillingly calm, devoid of all warmth. "We need to talk." And then she told me. No long explanations, no beating around the bush. Just cold, hard facts. She'd reconnected with an old colleague from work. A guy named Brian, someone I'd only heard mentioned in passing. "We were just talking at first," she said, but her voice faltered, just for a second, as she spoke of later meetings, coffee dates that stretched into evenings, messages that turned into declarations of love. "He makes me feel alive, Ron. I'm sorry, but I can't keep living like this." I stood there frozen, as if the blood in my veins had stopped flowing. "Living like this? How, Melissa?" I asked, my voice trembling, barely a whisper. "Living with me? With Cameron? With our family? What is it you can't stand?" She didn't answer right away. She turned her face away, her shoulders trembling slightly. "I'm not happy," she finally said, her voice flat, emotionless, like she was reading a script. "I tried, but I can't. I want a divorce." The word divorce hit me like a sledgehammer, knocking the wind right out of me. I wanted to scream. To ask her why. To beg her to reconsider, for Cameron, for the years we'd spent together, for the love I thought we had. But I just stood there, motionless, watching the woman I loved become a total stranger before my very eyes. "What about Cameron?" I asked, my voice choking on the words, barely audible. "She's only 8 months old, Melissa," What are you going to do about her? She was silent. And that silence, it hurt more than any words ever could. I can't take care of her, she said, after a pause that stretched into an eternity, her voice cold as ice. You keep her, Ron. I need a new life. I don't even remember what I said after that. Maybe I didn't say anything at all. All I know is that when Melissa walked out of the apartment, pulling a small suitcase behind her, it felt like the world collapsed beneath my feet. She didn't look back. Not once. Not at me. Not at Cameron. The door slammed shut, and I stood there, alone, with my baby girl and a heart shattered into irreparable pieces. The days that followed passed in a hazy fog. I still went to work, stood by the production line at the steel factory, but my mind was adrift, lost. The deafening roar of the machines couldn't drown out the relentless questions swirling in my head. Why did she do this? What did I do wrong? How am I going to raise Cameron alone? Melissa didn't take long to act on her words. A week later, a court summons arrived. She had filed for divorce. I didn't have the strength, the will, to fight it. The court in our small town wasn't complicated, but it wasn't forgiving either. They divided our assets, a fancy term for the tiny apartment Melissa and I had slaved to pay off over the years, and the meager savings I'd scraped together for Cameron's future. That apartment, rundown though it was everything I'd been proud of. A home I'd built with sweat, with late-night shifts at the factory. The court ordered it sold, to split the money, because I certainly couldn't afford to buy out Melissa's share. Everything happened dizzily fast. Appraisers came, then the for sale sign went up. I stood watching the apartment where Cameron was born, where I thought we'd have a forever home, sold off for a pittance, for almost nothing. On the day they came to clear out the furniture, I stood in the corner of the empty room, holding Cameron in my arms. She babbled, her tiny hands clutching my shirt, as if she could sense her father's profound pain. I watched as the last of our belongings were taken away. The sofa where I'd sat holding Cameron, singing her lullabies. The kitchen table where Melissa used to cook simple dinners, where we talked about our future. The bed where we'd once lain together, dreaming of a life we'd build. All of it now, just ghosts, just painful memories. I got half the money from the sale, but it was barely anything after paying off the bank, after paying the lawyers. Melissa took her share and simply vanished. I heard rumors she'd moved to Indianapolis with Brian, her new life, her new love. She didn't call. She didn't ask about Cameron. She left our daughter behind, left me, as if we'd never even existed in her life. I tried to stay strong for Cameron. She was the only reason I didn't completely fall apart, didn't give up. Every morning, I looked into her clear, innocent eyes, and told myself I had to be strong, I had to be her rock. But the truth was, I was breaking, shattering into a million pieces. I hadn't just lost my wife, my home. I'd lost faith in everything I thought would last forever. I had no choice but to turn to my parents for help. Dad, I need help, I said, my voice breaking with shame, with desperation, when I called my father Kenneth. Melissa left. It's just me and Cameron now. I don't know what to do. There was a long silence. So long, I thought he'd refuse, hang up. But then he spoke, his voice dry and curt, devoid of any warmth. Come back here. Stay with us for now. But you'll need to contribute to living expenses. We're not exactly flush with money. I let out a breath, though my heart still felt heavy, weighed down by the burden of my existence. I thought, at the very least, family would be a place where Cameron and I could find refuge. I packed the few belongings we had left. A small bag of my clothes, a few outfits for Cameron, and an old stuffed bear she loved to clutch when she slept. I held her close, stepped out of the now empty apartment, and caught a bus to my parents' house. As I boarded that last bus out of town, with Cameron in my arms, I felt like a complete and utter failure. The apartment, where I thought we'd have a forever home, was now someone else's. The money from its sale was nearly gone. I held my daughter tighter and whispered, I'll figure it out, Cameron. I promise. But deep down, I didn't know how I'd ever keep that promise. My parents' house sat on the edge of town, a weathered two-story home with faded shingles and a front yard overrun with weeds. I stood at the door, holding Cameron, my heart pounding like a beggar's, filled with shame. I didn't want to come back here. Didn't want to face my parents' cold, judgmental stares. But I had no other choice. I knocked, and when my mother, Denise, opened the door, she looked me up and down, a barely disguised look of distaste on her face. "Come in, Ron," she said, her voice completely devoid of warmth. "But don't make noise. Your father's resting." I carried Cameron up to my old room. It was still there, but not as I remembered it. A thin layer of dust coated everything. The bed was covered with an old, tattered sheet, and the corner was stuffed with random cardboard boxes my parents had shoved in. "This room hasn't been used in a while. Clean it yourself," my mother said, her tone flat, as if it were no big deal, as if I were a stranger. I swallowed hard, looking around the room that once held my childhood dreams, now cold, dusty, and utterly forgotten. The house only had 3 bedrooms. My parents' was the largest, at the end of the hall. Derek's, my younger brother's, was tidy, with a fresh mattress and his personal belongings untouched, because he and his wife visited often. And then there was my room. Now little more than a storage closet. The favoritism stabbed at my heart from that very first moment. But I stayed silent. I just needed a place for Cameron, even if this childhood room had faded with time, just like my parents' love. I cleaned the room, spread out a new blanket I bought with the little money I had left, set up Cameron's crib next to the bed, and tried to turn this sad, dusty place into a makeshift home. "This used to be our room," I whispered to her, holding her close. She babbled, grabbing my finger, and I turned away to hide my tears, to hide my crushing sense of failure. As for my family, my father, Kenneth, was a harsh man. A former railroad worker, now retired. He spoke little, but every word cut like a knife. "You need to pay for expenses, Ron," he said on my first day, as I was unpacking in my room, my childhood room. "We can't afford to feed 2 extra mouths." And then, the cruelest blow. "And keep it quiet. Don't let Cameron's crying disturb us." I nodded, not daring to argue. I knew my parents had their own struggles. Dad's pension was modest, and Mom worked part-time at a grocery store. But the fact that they preserved Derek's room like a museum, while mine was left to gather dust, made their blatant favoritism painfully, sickeningly clear. Derek, my younger brother, had always been the golden child. Smarter, sent to college with my parents' unwavering support, while I had to start working early, straight out of high school, to fend for myself. Now, when I needed help the most, they still prioritized him. As if I wasn't worth as much, wasn't as good. I went back to the steel factory, working like a machine, taking on night shifts, any shift, to make ends meet. Each day, I left the house before dawn, leaving Cameron with a kind neighbor who watched her for a small, precious fee. I worked amid the roar of machinery, sweat soaking my shirt. But my mind was always with Cameron. I feared she'd go hungry, get sick, or that I wouldn't be able to provide for her, to protect her. My wages, after paying for childcare and giving my parents their share for expenses, left me with almost nothing. But I gritted my teeth and pushed through. For Cameron. For the hope that one day, somehow, I'd get us out of this house where love seemed reserved only for the successful, for Derek. But my parents didn't make things any easier. My mother constantly reminded me of my failures, her words like tiny, sharp needles. "Look at Derek," she said one evening as I came home after a grueling 12-hour shift, my hands still black with machine oil. "He has a career, a proper family. Why can't you be like him, Ron?" I bowed my head, silent. Derek was their pride and joy. He worked for an insurance company in Indianapolis, had a beautiful wife named Laura and a nice house. To my parents, Derek was the picture of success. While I was just a failed factory worker, dragging along a young child, a burden. Even though I was in my own childhood room, I didn't envy Derek. He was my brother, and I was glad he had a good life. But every time my mother compared us, it felt like another stab to my already bleeding heart. I wanted to scream that I was trying my absolute best, that I didn't choose to be abandoned by my wife, to lose my home, to come back here like a loser with my daughter in tow. But I stayed quiet, holding Cameron close and whispering, "I'll make it, kid." My childhood room, with its faded memories on the walls, became the place where I silently swallowed my pain, where I held my daughter each night and prayed for a way out. Things got even worse when Laura, Derek's wife, gave birth to twins. The 2 babies, a boy and a girl, arrived like a whirlwind, instantly drawing all my parents' attention, all their affection. Suddenly, the house was filled with laughter and chatter. My parents bought toys, diapers, cute clothes for Derek's kids. Every weekend, Derek and Laura brought the twins over, and the house buzzed like a truly happy family, except for me and Cameron, who were just invisible. Derek's room became the headquarters for the grandkids, filled with new toys, echoing with their laughter. While my room, my childhood room, was treated like a temporary burden, a nuisance. The favoritism hit me hard, a punch to the gut. My mother would hold Derek's twins, beaming with pure joy, whispering sweet words, while Cameron, her own granddaughter, got only a passing glance, or a sharp scolding when she cried. Cameron's growing fast, but she's too noisy. My mother said coldly one night when Cameron was fussy from teething. You need to teach her to behave, Ron. We need rest to take care of Derek's kids. I wanted to shout that Cameron was her granddaughter too. That she needed love, just like the other kids. But I knew it was pointless. My parents poured all their affection, all their love, into Derek and his family, as if they were the real family. While Cameron and I were just temporary intruders, unworthy of priority, unworthy of love. My father was even more direct. One evening, as I came home from work, he called me into the living room. Ron, he said, his voice stern, unyielding. You've been here long enough. We can't keep supporting you and Cameron forever. Derek needs us more. He's got 2 kids, big responsibilities, and when they visit, we need space for them to be comfortable. You need to figure things out. I stood there, stunned, as if I'd been slapped hard across the face. Dad, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, to contain the rising panic. I'm doing my best. I work all day. I pay for expenses. I just need a little more time. For Cameron. I'm begging you for her sake. But he just shook his head. You're a grown man, Ron. A man stands on his own 2 feet. We can't carry any more burdens, especially when Derek and his kids need us. The word burden pierced my heart like a dagger, twisting deep. To my parents, Cameron and I weren't family. We were a burden. They were willing to keep a room ready for Derek's visits, but me, their eldest son, in my own childhood room, was being pushed out onto the street. The tension in the house grew thicker, suffocating. Every cry from Cameron, every time I accidentally spilled something in my room, became an excuse for my mother to complain, to unleash her frustration. That kid's too loud, Ron. She'd snap. You need to find somewhere else to stay. Derek and Laura are coming with the kids soon, and we need to prepare the house for them. I tried to explain that I was saving money, that I just needed more time, but she wouldn't listen. Derek never caused this kind of trouble, she'd say. And I knew, in her cold, unforgiving eyes, I'd never measure up to my perfect brother. The fateful day came abruptly. One morning, as I was getting ready for work, my father called me in. He stood at the door of my room, my childhood room, now filled only with painful memories, his eyes cold, devoid of all emotion. Ron, he said, his voice flat. You need to move out. We need this room to fix up for Derek's kids when they visit. You have 2 weeks. I stood there, holding Cameron, feeling the ground literally collapse beneath me. 2 weeks? I repeated, my voice trembling, barely a whisper. Dad, where am I supposed to go? How are Cameron and I supposed to live? That's your problem, he replied, then turned away without a single glance back. My mother stood in the corner silent, but her eyes said it all. She agreed with him. And I, her eldest son, no longer had a place in this house, in their lives. I went back into the room, sat on the bed, and held Cameron close. She babbled, clutching my shirt as if sensing her father's profound, debilitating pain. I looked around my childhood room, its walls once witnesses to my dreams, now just a place of temporary humiliation, a cold reminder of how little I meant to them. I'd lost everything. My wife, my home, and now my own family, my own parents. I didn't know where I'd go, or what I'd do. But I knew one thing, one absolute truth. I had to protect Cameron, no matter the cost, no matter what I had to endure. The 2 weeks passed like a living nightmare. I spent every spare moment searching for a new place to live, scouring local newspapers, asking old factory friends for any leads. The money left from selling the house wasn't much, but it was enough to rent a cheap, run-down apartment on the absolute outskirts of town. A dilapidated building with stained walls and a musty smell, not unlike the dank basement of my parents' house. The landlord, a gaunt old man named Frank, eyed me and Cameron suspiciously. No noise and pay on time, he said, his voice raspy from years of smoking. I nodded, signing the lease with trembling hands, and moved in with our few remaining belongings, a foldable bed from my parents' house, Cameron's crib, and a small gas stove I bought at a second-hand market. The apartment was a single room with a shared bathroom in the hallway. But at least it was ours. For now, I thought. I could make it work. My factory wages were steady, though incredibly tight. I'd work harder, save every single penny for rent, for Cameron's milk, and for simple food like cold-cut sandwiches. "We'll be okay, kid," I whispered to Cameron each night as she slept soundly in her crib, a tiny beacon of hope in the darkness. But reality was harsher than I'd imagined. Living costs here were higher than expected. Utilities, gas, and small, inescapable expenses like diapers for Cameron. My savings dwindled like water slipping through my fingers, disappearing before my eyes. I cut back on everything. Ate less. Turned off the lights early, huddled in the dark, but it still wasn't enough. By the end of each month, I stared at piling bills, my heart tightening with an agonizing worry. The biggest problem was Cameron. She was almost a year old now, active, crawling, and needing constant, vigilant care. Back at my parents' house, I could leave her with that kind neighbor for a small fee. In this new, desolate place, I didn't know anyone I could trust. The nearest daycare charged double my weekly wage. Not enough money, I muttered, staring at a crumpled flyer taped to a lamp post. I couldn't leave her alone. She was too small, too fragile. So, I made a desperate, agonizing choice. I'd bring Cameron to work with me. It was a last resort, a desperate gamble, but I had no other option. That morning, I carried her to the steel factory, tucked inside an old backpack, my heart pounding in my chest like a drum. The deafening roar of machinery, the acrid smell of burning metal, this was no place for a child. I hid Cameron in a corner of the break room, inside a cardboard box lined with a blanket, praying she'd stay quiet. "Daddy's going to work, be good, okay?" I whispered, my voice thick with fear of getting caught, of losing the only thing keeping us afloat. My coworkers gave me odd looks but said nothing, maybe out of pity, maybe out of fear. I worked like a madman, darting between the production line and the break room to check on her, feeding her milk when she fussed. But I couldn't hide her forever. Cameron started crying, her wails small at first, then growing louder, cutting through the noise of the machines, a heartbreaking sound. The foreman, a burly man named Mike with a perpetually sour, unforgiving face, called me into his office. "Ron, are you out of your mind?" he bellowed, pointing at Cameron, now crying openly in my arms. "This is a factory, not a daycare. I've already warned you about your slipping performance." I bowed my head, my voice shaking uncontrollably. "I'm sorry, boss, but I have no one to watch her. My wife left. My family won't help. Just this once, I promise I'll." But Mike just shook his head, his face a mask of stone. "No, just this once, you're fired. Grab your stuff and get out." I stood there, frozen, as if the world had truly, finally collapsed. The job, the only thing keeping me afloat, was gone. I left the factory with Cameron in my arms, tears streaming down my face, mixing with the sweat, with the grime. "I'm sorry, kid," I whispered, but she just looked at me with innocent eyes, completely unaware of the catastrophe that had just struck us. Losing my job was a death blow. A crushing, final blow. I wandered the town, applying everywhere, grocery stores, auto shops, even fast food joints. But my resume wasn't impressive. Just a 31-year-old factory worker with no degree, now burdened with a young child. "We need full-time workers with no distractions," one manager said, glancing dismissively at Cameron in my arms. "Sorry, but no." I tried place after place, but the answer was always the same. Rejection. Each door that shut in my face made me feel smaller, more useless, more worthless. The meager unemployment benefits barely lasted a few weeks, but the bills kept coming, relentless. I used up my last savings to pay rent, but eventually, I couldn't keep up. One rainy afternoon, Frank, the landlord, knocked on my door. "Ron, you're 2 months behind," he said coldly, without a shred of sympathy. "Move out. I need to rent to someone else." I begged. "Mr. Frank, please, give me more time. I'm looking for work, I'll pay." But he just shook his head and walked away, his decision final. The next day, our few belongings were unceremoniously tossed onto the sidewalk. I stood in the rain, holding Cameron close under my worn-out jacket, watching the apartment, the last place we called home, locked shut, forever out of reach. There was nowhere left to go. I called my parents one last time, my voice breaking, shattering with desperation. "Dad, please. I just need a place to stay." Cameron soaked. I don't know what to do. But my father's voice was dry, unfeeling, over the phone. Ron, we can't. Derek and Laura are coming with the twins. We have to take care of them. Figure it out, son. The call ended. And my world went dark, utterly black. They refused. Because of Derek. Always Derek. I held Cameron, wandering in the rain, my heart utterly shattered. We were officially homeless. That first night, we took shelter under a highway bridge, where other drifters gathered. Rain pattered overhead, and the wind cut through like ice, biting at our exposed skin. I wrapped Cameron in an old, threadbare blanket, holding her close, trying with all my might to keep her warm. She cried, from hunger, from cold, and all I could do was whisper, "Daddy's here, kid! Daddy's here!" The next morning, I went to the local church where they handed out free food. A kind old woman gave me a box of milk and bread, her eyes full of pity, full of understanding. "Take this, son. God will watch over you and your girl." I took it, tears streaming down my face, feeling a flicker of warmth, a tiny spark of humanity from a stranger for the first time in what felt like forever. Under the bridge, we survived day to day. I learned to get food from soup kitchens, where other homeless people shared their stories. Lost jobs, lost homes, lost everything, just like me. They didn't judge. They didn't play favorites. An old man named Joe, a former mechanic, gave me an old tent and taught me how to start a fire for warmth. "Down here, everyone's struggling, but we help each other," he said, clapping my shoulder, a gesture of true brotherhood. A woman named Maria, also raising a young child, gave Cameron some hand-me-down clothes and watched her when I went job hunting, a futile effort. These people at the absolute bottom of society, showed me more humanity, more kindness, than my own family ever had. Unlike my parents, they shared without expecting anything, listened without comparing. Under that bridge, in those freezing, desolate nights, I learned that true kindness comes from the most unexpected places. Cameron, though so young, seemed to feel it too. She smiled more when playing with the other kids under the bridge, her innocence a stark contrast to our grim reality. But this life wasn't easy. Every night I lay awake, worrying about the future, about her future. Cameron started getting sick from the constant cold, and I had to beg at a free clinic for a doctor to see her. "She'll be okay, but she needs a warmer place," they said. I nodded, but I knew we had nowhere to go. I kept looking for work, but with my ragged clothes and the smell of campfire smoke clinging to me, no one would hire me. I struggled. I went hungry. But for Cameron, I didn't give up. She was my only light, the reason I kept breathing, kept fighting. Then, one evening, a storm rolled in. Rain poured down in sheets, and fierce winds shook our flimsy tent. Water seeped through the ground, soaking the blankets, soaking us. I huddled with Cameron in a corner, using my jacket to shield her, but droplets still fell on us, chilling us to the bone. She wailed, her cries blending with the booming thunder, a sound that echoed my own despair. "Sure, it's okay. Daddy's here," I soothed, my heart pounding with raw worry, raw fear. Joe and Maria had gone to find shelter elsewhere, leaving us alone under the dark, rumbling bridge. I thought it was the worst night of my life, cold, hungry, and utterly hopeless. I prayed silently, though I barely believed in God anymore. "Please give us a way out." Suddenly, through the torrential rain, I saw a shadowy figure approaching. An old man, tall but slightly stooped, dressed in an expensive black suit, holding an umbrella against the storm's fury. He stopped in front of our tent, his eyes cutting through the darkness, settling on me and Cameron. I held her tighter, my protective instincts flaring, primal and fierce. Under this bridge, a stranger could be anyone. A crook. A cop. Or just another desperate drifter. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice raw from the cold, struggling to sit up, to shield her. The old man didn't answer right away. He folded his umbrella, and crouched down to see us better, his wrinkled face lit by sharp, intelligent eyes, as if studying something precious that had been lost. "I'm Philip," he said, his voice warm and steady, a stark contrast to the storm raging outside. "I'm your grandfather, Ronald." I froze. The word grandfather echoed in my head like thunder, like a distant memory, but impossible. My whole life, my father Kenneth had told me my grandfather died when I was young. "A car accident," he'd said, and we never spoke of it again. No photos, no mementos, just a gaping void in our family story. "What? What did you say?" I stammered, my voice trembling, disbelieving. My grandfather's dead. My dad said. So, who are you really? How do you know my name? Philip gave a sad smile, his eyes glistening under the faint glow of a faraway street light reflecting off the bridge's wet concrete. I didn't die, Ronald. Your father Kenneth lied. He took all my money, abandoned me and your grandmother, then spread that story to cover it up. I've been looking for you for a very long time, through a private investigator. I know everything about Melissa, the divorce, what you're going through. He paused, looking at Cameron, now sobbing softly in my arms. And this little girl, my great-granddaughter. Don't let her stay in this cold. Come with me. I want to take care of you both. To make up for what you've lost. I stared at the old man, my mind reeling, spinning. Doubt surged. Was this a cruel trick? A con man preying on desperate, vulnerable people like me? But as I looked closer, really looked, I saw an eerie resemblance. Sharp blue eyes, just like my father's. A crooked smile I vaguely recalled from hazy, almost forgotten dreams of my past. And his voice, warm, sincere, not like a liar's. The rain kept falling. The wind howled. And Cameron cried louder from the cold. I had nothing left to lose. No home, no job, no family. If he was a bad person, could things possibly get worse than this? But if he was telling the truth, maybe this was it. Maybe this was the way out, the glimmer of hope I'd been desperately praying for Cameron. I looked at my daughter, her cheeks flushed from crying, her tiny body shivering, and my heart twisted. All right, I said, my voice choked, raw with emotion. I'll go with you. But if you're lying, I won't forgive you. Not for my daughter's sake. Philip nodded, standing and holding his umbrella over us. You won't regret this, Ronald. Come on, my car's nearby. I picked up Cameron and followed him through the rain, my steps heavy with exhaustion and doubt. But deep inside, a faint spark of hope flickered. Maybe, just maybe, fate was finally smiling on us. We stepped out from under the bridge, the rain still pattering on Philip's umbrella. His car, a sleek black limousine with a uniformed driver waiting, stood not far off, its headlights cutting through the rain like a beacon. I hesitated for a second, glancing back at the soggy tent, now torn apart by the wind. Then I climbed into the car. Inside, it was impossibly warm, the leather seats soft, luxurious. And a child's car seat was already installed. Philip sat across from me, giving a faint, gentle smile when he saw my surprise. I came prepared, he said, his voice warm, reassuring. She needs to be safe. I held Cameron closer. She'd stopped crying, perhaps soothed by the sudden warmth, by the quiet hum of the engine. I stared out the window as the car pulled away, leaving the bridge, leaving our nightmare behind. We left Indiana, heading for Florida, a long journey, but Philip had arranged a private plane from a nearby airport. I didn't ask much. My exhausted mind focused only on keeping Cameron warm, on this surreal dream. During the flight, I drifted into sleep, deep, peaceful sleep. The first time in months I wasn't jolted awake by cold winds or passing traffic. When we landed in Tampa, the sky was bright, a brilliant, hopeful blue. Another car waited, taking us to the city's outskirts. The scenery changed as we drove, from bustling streets to tree-lined roads, then to a gated community with high fences and an imposing iron gate. The car stopped in front of a sprawling mansion, like something right out of a magazine, a two-story, cream-colored building with red-tiled roofs, surrounded by lush green gardens and a shimmering pool under the glorious Florida sun. I stood there, holding Cameron, my jaw dropping in sheer awe. This is your house," I stammered, barely able to speak. Philip smiled, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder. "Our house, Ronald. Come inside. You and your daughter need rest." Stepping into the mansion felt like entering another world, a different dimension. The grand foyer had gleaming marble floors, a sparkling crystal chandelier, and a faint, sweet scent of fresh flowers from a large vase. A middle-aged woman in a maid's uniform greeted us with a warm smile. "Welcome, sir, and welcome, Ronald, and little Cameron," she said as if she'd known us forever. Philip introduced her. "This is Elena, the housekeeper. Over there is Louise, the chef, and security's at the gate. They'll take care of everything." I nodded, still dazed, still in shock. Philip led us upstairs to a spacious guest room with a king-sized bed, a private bathroom, and a corner filled with brand-new toys for kids, brightly colored, waiting. "This is for you and Cameron," he said. I had it ready. Later, Philip called a private doctor. A middle-aged man named Dr. Ramirez arrived within half an hour, carrying a full medical kit. He examined Cameron first, checking her temperature, listening to her tiny lungs, and prescribing medicine for her cough. "She has a mild cold, but she'll be fine with proper care," he said, then turned to me. I sat there as he checked me. High blood pressure from stress. Malnourishment. Minor cuts and bruises from street life. "You need rest and proper meals," he advised. Philip nodded and instructed the chef to prepare dinner. For the first time in months, I ate a real meal. Hot chicken soup, fresh salad, and toasted bread. Cameron got special formula milk, which she drank eagerly, her eyes brightening with every sip. That night, I lay on the soft, luxurious bed, listening to Cameron's steady, peaceful breathing in her crib beside me, and slept deeply. No nightmares. No worries. For the first time in years. The first days in the mansion passed like a dream. The house wasn't just grand, it was equipped with every comfort imaginable. A fruit orchard in the backyard where I could stroll with Cameron, a gym, and a library full of books. 24/7 security, daily cleaning by the staff, and 3 nutritious meals from the chef. Philip hired a nanny named Sophia, a gentle young woman who'd worked at a high-end daycare, to look after Cameron when I needed a break. "You need time to recover," Philip said. "Let Sophia handle her." I hesitated at first, but Sophia quickly proved trustworthy. She sang lullabies to Cameron, played with her, and even taught me how to massage her to ease her cough. Cameron visibly improved. Her cheeks grew rosy, she smiled more, she started to crawl playfully around the room. As for me, I took hot showers daily, ate proper meals, and felt my body slowly, miraculously, coming back to life. Doubts lingered, the scars of my past, but each day they faded under Philip's genuine, unwavering care. We began settling into life here. Mornings, I woke to the smell of fresh coffee from the kitchen, eating breakfast with Philip as he talked about Florida, the sea, the warm sun. In the afternoons, I took Cameron to the garden, watching her giggle as she touched the soft leaves, the vibrant flowers. At night, Sophia watched her while I relaxed, reading or just gazing at the stars, feeling a peace I hadn't known in ages. Philip didn't push, only gently asking about my life, about Melissa, about the hardships I'd endured. "There's no rush," he said. "You need time." I started opening up slowly, telling him about the steel factory, the betrayal, my parents and Derek. Philip listened, his eyes heavy with sadness, as if truly sharing my pain. Then one evening, with Cameron asleep under Sophia's gentle care, Philip invited me to the balcony. A spot overlooking the pool shimmering under the soft lights, a truly magical sight. He poured 2 glasses of wine, sat in a comfortable leather chair, and said, "Ronald, it's time I told you the truth about the past, about why I found you." My heart raced, suddenly. The air felt heavy, thick with unspoken history, the faint sea breeze carrying a hint of salt. Philip stared into the distance, his voice low, measured, as if recounting a painful, ancient story. "Years ago, when I was younger, I had a happy family. Your grandmother, my wife, and our son, Kenneth, your father. I worked hard, saved money in bonds for our future, for their future. But Kenneth, he changed. He got hooked on gambling, racked up enormous debts. One night, he took everything from the safe. Cash, bonds, even sold some priceless family heirlooms. And vanished without a word. Your grandmother was devastated. She had a heart attack that very night, and she was gone. Forever." Philip's voice broke. He took a sip of wine, his eyes red-rimmed, glistening with unshed tears. I sat there stunned, picturing it. My grandmother, whom I'd never known, dying from her own son's betrayal. I was nearly 50, penniless, heartbroken. Philip continued, his voice regaining strength. I thought my life was over. But I didn't give up. I started over. A small job in real estate, borrowing from friends, working day and night, relentlessly. Over decades I built Sunbay Properties, a coastal real estate company. From a tiny office in Tampa, I now have branches across Florida and beyond. I'm wealthy, Ronald, but my heart was always empty. Losing my wife, my son, and not knowing what became of my grandson. He paused, looking at me, his gaze full of profound regret. Recently, I hired investigators. They found Kenneth. Then they found you, Ronald Hull, a factory worker in Indiana, divorced, kicked out by your parents, Homeless under a bridge with your baby girl. I couldn't sit by. I had to find you. To make up for what you've suffered because of Kenneth's mistakes, because of his cruelty. I sat there reeling, as if struck by lightning. The truth lay bare, stark and brutal. My father, Kenneth, wasn't a victim of fate. He was a thief, a betrayer, who caused my grandmother's death. And my grandfather, whom I thought was dead, sat here, wealthy and full of regret, a testament to resilience. I was grateful. He'd saved us from hell, from the literal streets. But also anguished by my parents' lies, their years of deceit. Why did my dad do it? I asked, my voice choked with emotion. Philip shook his head. He was weak, Ronald. But you're different. You're strong. Like I was. We sat in silence for a long time, the sea breeze whispering like a gentle comfort, like a lullaby. I looked at the shimmering pool, my heart a storm of conflicting emotions, but also, finally, a sense of relief. At last, I had a real family. A real home. For Cameron. The days that followed were spent processing that truth, letting it sink in, piece by painful piece. During the day, I took Cameron to the garden, watching her crawl clumsily on the lush green lawn, giggling as she touched the vibrant flowers. Sophia, the nanny, was always there, helping me care for her without ever making me feel inadequate. But at night, when the mansion fell silent, memories crashed over me like relentless waves. I thought about my parents, about growing up in that old house in Indiana, where Dad always spoke of my late grandfather with feigned regret, a performance. Now I understood why he rarely talked about the past, why Mom dodged my questions about Grandma. They built a towering edifice of lies to hide their guilt, their heinous crime. And I, their eldest son, had lived in its shadow, utterly without knowing, for decades. I was angry, yes, a searing, righteous anger. But also profoundly sad. Sad for my grandmother, for Philip, and for the lost years of my own life. I called my parents once, just once, but they didn't pick up. Maybe they thought I was calling to bother them, or to beg again. I didn't call again. I had Philip now. And Cameron. That was enough. More than enough. Philip didn't push me to do anything right away. He gave me time to heal, to mend. But he also subtly hinted at the future, at a path forward. One morning, as we ate breakfast on the patio, crisp toast, fresh fruit, steaming coffee, he looked at me and said, "Ronald, have you rested enough? Sunbait Properties could use someone like you. Start small. A sales position. No special treatment, just a chance to learn." I was taken aback, staring at him. "Grandpa, I'm just a factory worker. I don't know anything about real estate." Philip smiled, patting my shoulder. "You know about life, Ronald. That's something no school can teach. Give it a try. For Cameron. She needs a steady father, a secure future." I hesitated, but then I agreed. I didn't want to live off his generosity forever. I wanted to earn my place for Cameron. On my first day at the company, I wore a suit Philip bought me, feeling like I was in someone else's clothes, a costume. Sunbait Properties was in downtown Tampa, a modern glass building with a gleaming logo under the bright sun. The office buzzed with activity. Employees on phones, at computers, the air thick with ambition. Philip introduced me to the team but didn't highlight our connection, only saying I was a new hire. "Learn, Ronald," he whispered before leaving me to fend for myself. My role was modest, sitting at a small desk, calling potential clients, pitching coastal properties. A coworker, a kind guy named Kyle, guided me. "Just be genuine. Don't push clients like that." The first weeks were tough. Brutally tough. I was used to manual labor at the factory, the roar of machines and sweating through my shirt. Now I had to learn to persuade, to read complex contracts, to handle numbers, to understand market trends. Some calls ended abruptly with clients snapping. "Not interested. Goodbye." I came home exhausted, drained, but I didn't quit. Not now. I remembered the days under the bridge, Cameron crying from the cold. That was my drive. My relentless, unwavering drive. I studied hard, reading real estate books Philip left in the home library, asking Kyle about sales techniques, observing meetings, soaking it all in. My honesty became an asset. Clients sensed sincerity when I explained the practical benefits of a beachfront home. No exaggeration, just truth. Slowly, I proved myself. A month later, I closed my first deal. A middle-aged couple bought a small condo in Clearwater. They said, You explain things clearly, not like other salespeople. Kyle slapped my shoulder. Nice work, Ron. You've got a knack for this. I smiled, but inside, I was profoundly grateful for my past struggles. Melissa's betrayal taught me patience. My parents' favoritism made me humble. Homelessness forged my resolve, turning me into steel. I wasn't the timid factory worker anymore. I cared about my coworkers, listened to their issues, and acted quickly. In a team project, when arguments broke out over client approaches, I suggested a middle ground. Think of clients like family. They need homes, not empty promises. The team agreed, and the project succeeded beyond expectations. The senior manager, Helen, a sharp, astute woman in her 50s, praised me in a meeting. Ronald, you've got leadership potential. Keep that integrity, and you'll go far. Time passed. 3 years, in fact. It sounds long, but to me, it was a whirlwind, a blur of learning and growth. I climbed the ranks, not because of family ties, but through sheer merit, through hard-earned ability. Then came the turning point. Not dramatic like in a movie, but real and earned, profoundly satisfying. In a boardroom meeting, Philip stood, his voice resonating in the sleek, glass-walled room. I've watched Ronald for 3 years. No privileges, no favoritism. He started at the bottom and rose through ability, increasing revenue by 100% and 50%, expanding 4 branches, and building a company culture based on trust. The managers clapped, a wave of genuine applause. Helen smiled, her eyes approving. Ronald deserves this. Philip looked at me, his gaze full of pride. As of today, you're CEO of Sunbay Properties. I stood there, stunned, my heart pounding, vibrating with disbelief and joy. This wasn't a dream. It was real. I hugged Philip, whispering, "Thank you, Grandpa." He patted my shoulder, his voice gentle. "You did this, Ronald." Being CEO wasn't easy. I sat in a large office with a vast, glittering ocean view, but the responsibilities were immense. Strategic decisions, investor meetings, crisis management. The company thrived under my leadership. Record revenue. Expansion into Georgia. Partners respected my reliability, my integrity. Once, during a market downturn, I rejected a high-profit but risky deal. "We don't gamble with clients' futures," I said. They respected that. And more contracts, more partnerships followed. I stayed humble, eating lunch with employees, listening to ideas from the ground up. "I was once like you," I told the staff at a company meeting. "Let's build together." Cameron became my greatest joy, my reason for everything. Now 5, she's bright, lively, and always asking about my work. "What do you do at the company, Daddy?" she asked, sitting on my lap at the dinner table, her eyes wide with curiosity. "I help people get nice homes like ours," I replied, kissing her forehead. She attends a private school, plays piano, and swims. Things I never dreamed of as a kid. She's my drive. Every company decision, I think of her, of building a legacy she can be proud of. The media took notice. A local business magazine ran a feature. From homeless factory worker to CEO, Ronald Holt's inspiring story. They interviewed me in my office, and I spoke honestly. About Melissa, my parents, the bridge, and Philip. "Life taught me failure isn't the end," I said. The article went viral. A local morning show invited me. Sitting on their sofa, I shared my story with a genuine smile. "From homeless to CEO, how'd you do it?" the host asked. I looked straight into the camera. "Thanks to my grandfather, and never giving up. Everyone has a chance if they keep going." The interview boosted the company's fame. Clients poured in, and I received letters from people who'd struggled just like me, thanking me for giving them hope. But the past wouldn't let me rest. Not entirely. One afternoon, as I sat in my office, reviewing revenue reports from the new Orlando branch, my phone rang. It was the receptionist. Her voice uneasy. "Ronald, there are 2 people in the lobby claiming to be your parents. They insist on seeing you now." I froze, gripping the phone tightly. My parents. Kenneth and Denise. After all these years. After they threw Cameron and me out like beggars. I took a deep, steadying breath, telling myself, I'm not that weak Ronald anymore. "Let them wait in the lobby," I said, my voice calm, resolute. "I'm coming down." I stood, gazing out the window at the sparkling Tampa Bay under the sun, and told myself, I'm not that weak Ronald anymore. I walked down to the lobby, where the crystal chandeliers gleamed off the polished marble floor. There they stood. My father in a tight, outdated suit. My mother in a worn wool coat, her eyes darting around, appraising the building's worth, their eyes wide with greed. It was the first time I'd seen them since they kicked us out of their Indiana home, all those years ago. My father looked at me, forcing an awkward, plastic smile. "Ron, my boy. We saw you on TV. You've made it. We're so proud." My mother chimed in, her voice syrupy, fake. "Yes, Ron. We should reconnect. Family, right? We could help you manage all this." She waved her hand around the lobby as if already staking a claim. I stood there, staring at them coldly, my heart no longer aching. Just calm. "Help? Like how you helped me and Cameron when you threw us out on the street? When I begged, and you refused, all for Derek and his kids?" My father's face went pale, a sickly white, and he stammered. "Ron, those were tough times. You're rich now. We can let it go. We're your family." I shook my head, my voice steady, unwavering. "Family? You abandoned me when I needed you most. And now you come for a share? No way." Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed from the elevator. Philip appeared, tall and posing in a sharp gray suit, his eyes cold as steel. He stopped beside me, staring straight at my parents, or rather, at his son, Kenneth. My father froze, his face ashen, as if he'd seen a ghost. "Philip. Dad! You're alive?" he stammered, stumbling back a step. My mother clutched his arm, her eyes wide with horror. "It's impossible. Kenneth said, you died years ago." Philip gave a chilling smile. "Yes, Kenneth said that. To cover his crimes. But I'm alive. And I'm the chairman of Sunbay Properties, the company you're standing in." The lobby grew tense. A few employees and clients paused to watch, the air crackling with anticipation. Philip didn't hesitate, his voice ringing clear, laying the truth bare for all to hear. "Kenneth, you stole everything. My money, my life savings, and abandoned your mother and me. Your mother, Ronald's grandmother, died of a heart attack from the shock. You left me penniless at 50, then spread lies that I was dead to live guilt-free. And then you abandoned your own son and granddaughter, Ronald and Cameron, when they needed you most, kicking them out for Derek's sake." My father shook his head, his face flushed, trying to defend himself. "It wasn't like that. I just borrowed it. Then things spiraled. You understand?" But Philip pulled a stack of papers from his pocket. Investigator reports. Old receipts. Even photos of the empty safe from years ago. "Here's the proof, Kenneth. You can't deny it. And Denise, you knew everything, but covered for him." My mother faltered, stammering. We didn't mean it, Ron. Say something." But I just stood there, looking at them. Two people who were once my parents, now just a painful memory. They couldn't argue. The evidence was undeniable. The lobby was silent. A few employees whispered. My parents lowered their heads, leaving in shame, without another word, their pride shattered. I watched them go, feeling no anger, no vindictiveness. Just a profound, liberating release. Some time later, Philip called me into his office. "Ronald, it's time to settle things," he said, his voice calm but resolute. He had invited my father, Kenneth, and Derek to a company meeting under the pretense of business discussions. I knew it wasn't an ordinary meeting, but I didn't object. The day arrived, and Sunbay Properties' grand conference hall was packed with employees and senior managers. My father and Derek walked in, Derek in a flashy, expensive suit, exuding false confidence, as if he were there to claim a share, while my father kept his head down, avoiding eye contact, already sensing his doom. They sat in the front row, Derek whispering to Dad, "Guess Ron's ready to share the success." Philip took the stage, his voice booming through the microphone. "Today, I'm announcing my official will. I'm 80 years old, and Sunbay Properties needs a worthy successor." The room fell silent, all eyes on him. He looked at me and smiled, a warm, proud smile. "Ronald Holt will inherit the majority of my estate and full control of the company. Not because of blood, but because he's proven his character and ability. From a sales associate to CEO, building this company stronger, with integrity and hard work." The hall erupted in applause. Helen and my colleagues cheered, standing. I stood, hugging Philip, my voice choked with gratitude. "Thank you, Grandpa?" My father and Derek were cut out entirely. Not a cent. Not a share. Derek's face went pale, and he shot to his feet. How can this be? I'm your grandson too. My father, trembling, pleaded in front of everyone. Philip, Dad, please forgive me. Ron, talk to him. We're family. The room went quiet, all eyes on the devastating scene. I stepped onto the stage, looking straight into my father's eyes. The man who once threw me and Cameron out. My voice was cold, but steady. The day you kicked me and Cameron out, I lost my father. The only person I respect now, the only real family I have, is my grandfather. My father sank into his chair, his face ashen, utterly defeated. Derek, flushed with embarrassment, pulled him up, and they left in silence, under the whispering, knowing gazes of the staff, departing in shame, with no further excuses. I watched them go, my heart finally at peace. The past was finally closed. After that meeting, everything became clearer than ever. I returned to the mansion, holding Cameron close, her warmth a constant reminder that life still held so much beauty. Philip patted my shoulder, his voice warm. You've done well, Ronald. Now it's time to live for the future. We ate dinner together, a true family meal, with Cameron's laughter echoing through the spacious room. She was growing up, her eyes bright, her smile radiant. No trace of those cold, desolate days under the bridge. I told her about her great-grandfather, about the hard lessons from the past, and she listened, even if she didn't fully understand. One evening, when things had settled into a new rhythm, a new peace, I took Cameron to the company building's balcony, the highest point in Tampa, with a sweeping, breathtaking view of the city's twinkling lights under the vast night sky. The cool sea breeze carried the scent of salt and freedom. I held her in my arms, pointing out the towering buildings and bustling streets below. Look, kid, that's our world, I whispered. Cameron giggled, waving as if greeting the lights. In that moment, I realized I'd come full circle. From the depths of despair, clutching my daughter under the pouring rain, to this pinnacle of honor, standing tall, as a man, as a father, as a CEO. I reflected on what I'd endured. Melissa's betrayal. My parents and Derek's coldness. The homeless nights under the bridge. And Philip's redemption, his unwavering love. They were no longer wounds that festered. They were lessons. The very foundation of what I'd achieved, a thriving company, a loving home, and a heart capable of profound, resilient love. I am both a successful CEO, leading Sunbay Properties to record revenues and relentless expansion, and a devoted father, spending every single weekend with Cameron, taking her to the beach, teaching her to swim, and telling her stories of the kind people we met under the bridge. She's growing up in a new family, a true family, filled with love. Philip, as a gentle great-grandfather. Sophia, as a caring aunt figure. And me, her dad, always there to protect her, to guide her. We're no longer alone. The mansion is now alive with laughter, shared meals, and new, beautiful memories. But deep down, I've learned a profound truth. Blood doesn't always make a family. My biological parents, despite sharing my blood, abandoned me when I needed them the most. Yet Philip, betrayed by his own son, came back to make amends, to rebuild. It's love, responsibility, and integrity that create a true legacy. The one I'll pass on to Cameron, so she grows up valuing those who truly stand by her, who truly love her. And if there's any advice I can give from this incredible, harrowing journey, it's this: keep pushing forward, no matter how tough the odds, no matter how impossible it seems. I once thought my life was over, rotting under that bridge. But I didn't give up. I took one step at a time, one breath at a time. The future will always be bright if you keep moving forward, never quitting. Life may push you to the bottom, to your knees, but you decide whether to stand up. For me, Cameron was my reason to rise. And now, I stand here at the top, ready for whatever comes next. Thank you for listening to my story. Take care. Good luck.